You're listening to the Doctor Is In podcast. This is the show where you get the best tips, tricks, and nutritional hacks to help you and your family get healthier. You'll also hear what works and what doesn't work so you don't have to waste your time and money. All right, let's get started.
Hello, I'm Dr. Martin Jr.
And I'm Dr. Martin Sr.
And this is the Doctor Is In podcast, and this is episode 108. And on today's episode, we're actually going to talk about a couple of interesting studies that have come out over the past couple of weeks. These are things that you and I have talked about off air, and they caught our eye, and we want to share them with you. Mm-hmm. But before we do that, we just want to talk about really something that is actually quite humorous, because we knew it would happen. We talked about this. We knew this was going to happen. It has to do with that study that came out from the, I'll read you the title of it, and we'll talk a little bit about this. Dietary Fats and Cardiovascular Disease, a Presidential Advisory from the American Heart Association. Now, the title may not mean anything to you, but the conclusions from this study made it on the news, and we got asked about it a lot, and it had to do with coconut oil and how the American Heart Association was telling you, essentially, that coconut oil was bad for you.
Yeah.
And we got a lot of questions about that. I mean, we really did. People are like, because we talk about how good coconut oil is for you. It's got a lot of saturated fat. It's tremendous for your brain. So we like coconut oil a lot. It's good to cook with. And, of course, this thing comes out. The news loves these kind of things. Threw it on all this news cycles. People blogged about it. People shared it on Facebook. And then next thing you know, people are confused. What's going on? I thought coconut oil is good for me. The American Heart Association is saying it's not. So what's the deal? Now, we always say this. The American Heart Association is the same one that would put check marks on highly sugared foods because they were low in fat and telling you that they were good for your heart.
Yeah, exactly. I always say they put a heart on the cereal boxes because if you eat it, you're going to get a heart attack. Guaranteed.
What caught our eye, and no news about this whatsoever.
No.
I mean,
is the retraction?
Well, it's not a retraction. It's they came out and disclosed their conflict of interest because they weren't necessarily in the original papers that came out. So here's one that I found funny, which they disclosed now under the section of other research support. The entry read none. So when they initially published the paper, the dude basically said no other support. Now it has been updated to say Unilever. And, of course, Unilever is a massive, massive company who just happens to make margarine.
Yeah.
Of course, so if I'm in competition with somebody and I'm a food company, I mean, if I can get something to say that their thing is really bad for you, and that's what's going to happen. So it went from no disclosures, none, like no, nothing. I got no conflict of interest, none, nothing, no, above board, to by the way, Unilever, right? So that's a funny one as well. And then somebody else had to update and say basically they've received money from lectures. So they've done some lectures, they've received some money from pharmaceutical companies, including Lilly, MSD, Novo Nordisk, I mean, on and on, right? The Sugar Barrel, the Pepsi company, are just a couple of them. So you can see, does that influence results?
Big time.
Yeah. I mean, if they're paying for your research, they're not going to continue to hire, whatever company you work for to do research if you're constantly coming back with results that necessarily go against what
you're producing, right?
Now, we talk a lot about this, and it bears repeating that a lot of these studies that make the news are correlation studies, right? One thing, basically they collect a lot of data, and a lot of times through food questionnaires and all these things, they collect a lot of data, they go through and they say, let's see what correlates with what. Now, there's a funny graphic that I have on my desktop whenever a correlation study comes up and the news loves it. These are weird correlations, and I'm going to share a couple with you because I find them humorous. For example, the number of people who drowned by falling into a pool correlates with the films Nicolas Cage has appeared in. So every time Nicolas Cage appears in a film, it correlates with somebody drowning by falling into a pool. Also, U.S. spending on science, space, and technology correlates with suicides by hanging, strangulation, and suffocation. And here's another one. Per capita cheese consumption correlates with the number of people who died by becoming tangled in their bed sheets. So we say this all the time. Correlation does not mean causation, right?
Yeah.
The amount of money that the U.S. is spending on science, space, and technology may correlate with the suicides by hanging, strangulation, and suffocation, but it doesn't cause it. So when you look at the data, you could say it correlates.
Yeah.
But when you actually think about it, you're like, yeah, it doesn't. So correlation does not cause causation.
Yeah.
Right? You can't do that.
Yeah.
And a lot of these studies, that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah. And then you've always said, too, especially when it comes to food and questionnaires, two things. You're going to probably be a big fat liar because you're always, I don't eat that. Because I hear it in the office all the time, especially with men. Women will be much more honest, but men are not very honest at all. Like you. I love the newsletter when you said it's like a golf score, right? I got I parred out, right? I got a par on that hole. What? That's funny. I thought you lost 2 balls, right? But anyway, it's just because we have a tendency to underestimate the amount of sugar we eat. Like I get that in the office every day. Well, Doc, I don't eat that stuff. Like I don't eat carbs. You don't? No, I don't have that.
Sometimes when people, we analyze a lot of diets, and sometimes the way that people are talking, it's almost like they're on the lowest carb diet possible. Like they don't eat carbs.
Yeah.
No, I don't eat any carbs. If you were to follow them around for the day, the evidence would speak otherwise.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's the reality, right? Unfortunately, with
nobody comes in and they're elevated, their insulin's elevated through the roof, and I take their urine, and I like the old fashioned test for diabetes, and they got sugar in their urine. If you got sugar in your urine, come on, how do you think it got there? Like you said, like your body does everything it can to regulate your blood sugar. I mean, your pancreas is dedicated to taking sugar out of your bloodstream. If you got sugar in your urine, I said, man, you are a carbaholic. You're eating sugar till it comes out your, But and then the other thing you always say too, when it comes to these correlation studies, I don't even remember what I had for breakfast yesterday.
No,
right?
If I sit here right now and try to list off what I had for lunch yesterday, and I had to write that in a piece of paper, there's a good chance it wouldn't be accurate.
Yeah, and you might remember yesterday's, but how about the day before, and how about the day before that, and how about the day before that?
And do you remember how many slices of turkey you had?
Yeah.
Was it 2? Was it 3?
Yeah.
Do you remember exactly how many slices of bacon? Yeah, and that's the reality. So we always take a lot of these things with a grain of salt, but unfortunately the media loves them, and they run with it. And in this case here, they caused a lot of questioning.
Yeah.
And the news ran with it, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, it's correlation, first of all. And also, again, not necessarily the message that should have came from that study.
No.
Right?
And the thing is, and I had patients that, like you said, was so confused, and I had to sort of set them straight. And I tell them, look, here's, your body needs fat. Coconut oil is an MCT. It's a medium chain
and
fat.
Your brain loves that stuff.
Your brain loves it. And you know what? I always tell people, I tell my patients, in the morning I line up my fat. And they kind of look at me. I said, listen, I want to have a brain that I don't want to outlive my brain. Right?
And that's a real big problem.
Well,
nowadays.
and I got to be sharp, and you and I have to be sharp all the time because we basically work with our brains. I don't do physical work, but I'm constantly always analyzing, thinking, diagnosing, differential diagnosis, and all these things. You got to be sharp. Anyway, I line up in the morning. I tell my patients, well, look, I take a shot glass literally of 3 different types of oil in the morning. I take olive oil. I drink it. People look at me. Well, I said, I don't eat enough olives. I don't mind olives sort of in a Mediterranean salad type of thing, but I'm not big on them. An extra virgin, cold-pressed, organic olive oil, I take a shot glass of that every day because I know that oil is good for me. I take a shot glass of fish oil every day. I take high DHA, which I'm sure we're going to talk about hopefully today, DHA oil because I know what it does for my brain and my heart and blah, blah, blah. I take coconut oil. I put it in my coffee because I have it in an MCT oil, the MCT oil, which is a combination of coconut oil and palm oil, which are just healthy fats. And fat don't make you fat, and fat don't give you cholesterol.
No, and your brain absolutely needs it,
yeah.
Right? Your brain, we talked about this before, but DHA is the fuel that your brain needs, right? So fats are good for your brain. If you want to have a healthy brain as you age, then absolutely.
And then I put olive oil on my skin, coconut oil on my skin.
Yeah.
I use coconut oil as a sunscreen. And every part of coconut,
that, right? A lot of people do that. It's a great way to keep your skin healthy.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reality.
There's nothing negative about it.
Well, let's talk real quickly about omega-3 and specifically DHA and EPA, which we absolutely love. A new study came out not that long ago that showed that those in the omega-3 group, so those that were taking omega-3, were 5 times more likely to have optimal cardiovascular health after the treatment compared to those who didn't, right? Mm-hmm. So, we always talk about the effect that DHA and EPA have on your brain and the effect that it has on your joints, the effect that it has on your skin. But at the end of the day, it's also, one of the best things that you can do for your heart.
Well, it douses that inflammation, right? It literally lowers the inflammatory markers in your body. Tremendous, right? Cardio. And you know what? Just to, by the way, you know what? They would hate to admit it, but I haven't met a cardiovascular, I haven't met a cardiologist yet that wouldn't agree about this one thing. They would all agree. And if they don't, they're literally dinosaurs. They would all agree, yes, the studies have shown that that omega-3 is very good for your heart.
And this study here was well done. It was a randomized, placebo-controlled, double-blind trial. And what I liked about the study, because a lot of the times when you see a study that says, omega-3 didn't work, it's because when you look at the methods of the study, they gave them like 1,000 milligrams, like a gram of it, like it's supposed to do miracle work. This study went higher. They did 4 grams. Now, all they say in the study is that it's 4 grams a day of fish oil, or the other group got the placebo. And again, 4 grams is tremendous, but is it really 4 grams? And that's, one of the biggest issues that we have when it comes to supplementing with DHA or fish oil is if you actually look at the contents of what they're taking, it may say 1,000 milligrams per capsule, but it's really only like 200 milligrams of DHA and EPA. This study could have been even better, in my opinion.
Yeah, if they'd have used a high DHA oil.
If they would have guaranteed 4 grams of DHA and EPA.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Now you're really, really attacking inflammation and the tremendous benefits that we see in our office every day.
So that's one study. Now, another study that caught your eye had to do with ketogenic and the brain. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, it was kind of interesting because I was speaking at a medical conference on the weekend, and this study came out, and I found it fascinating that, of course, we love the ketogenic diet and how good it is for everything, right? It's anti-inflammatory, it's anti-aging, it's anti-cardiovascular, it's anti-cancer, it's anti-diabetic, right? So we're very big on ketosis, but in the brain, there was a study done here on people that were taking antidepressants. And it shows that if they were taking like Seroquel and others like that, it contributed to insulin resistance in the brain, of which we have talked about so often, right? And that changes. So what happens is that when you're taking an antidepressant, you're creating diabetes of the brain. We always talk about, the diet creating that.
Well, and we should probably clarify this really quickly for those that are just new to our podcast. Mm-hmm. Every organ has the ability to become diabetic.
Yeah. On its own,
right? You can have diabetes, or you may not have diabetes, but your brain might have diabetes. Yeah. We call that type 3 diabetes.
If you got short-term memory loss, a lot of times, right, we know the hippocampus, gets affected. It starts shrinking. We talked about that, the importance of that.
We did a tremendous episode on that not too long ago.
But what they showed, okay, so this is the antidepressants. They get diabetes of the brain. Now they got severe insulin resistance. Their insulin's not working in the brain to metabolize. And so what happens? If you see you see somebody on antidepressants, what happens to them? They gain weight. They have it's almost 100-fold increase in diabetes, in Alzheimer's, and heart disease. And again, they showed that if you can get somebody even on medication, on an antidepressant, to take a ketogenic diet, they can reverse all their risk of the 4 things that I talked about: the weight gain, the Alzheimer's, the diabetes, and the heart disease, that they are so prevalent to get. It's astronomical how many people are antidepressants that get those 4 major disorders from taking the antidepressants, and they're finding out now why. Because of that insulin in the brain. And it's just something that you and I talk about all the time.
So if somebody is on antidepressants, there's no question that the best way to eat would be a low enough carb diet that they actually become ketogenic.
And just by the way, I have never seen a case that if you can get them to do it, and that is bipolar, if you can get them to go a very, very low carbohydrate diet and eliminate their sugars almost exclusively, how much better they get without medication. And usually the meds just sort of level them out, and even then
they got to play with them all the time.
They're playing with them all, and even then they lose. And then they when they're better, they don't want to take them anymore. And even then, does it even work? Anyway, I don't want to go there. I'm just talking about nutritionally. If I can convince those patients to make it part of their lifestyle that they go low carb.
Go low carb.
Makes such a difference on the brain.
Get enough B12, high levels of DHA.
Yeah.
It really is amazing what that can do. And it's definitely worth doing if you're on an antidepressant. Because as you mentioned, the research is showing that you're so much more likely to get those 4 things. A ketogenic diet may be able to prevent those 4 things from happening if you're on an antidepressant. And it might actually help with the depression as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, very, interesting, fascinating stuff that you would be able to say, yes, that's exactly what I see in my office as well.
Yep,
that
exactly.
Study doesn't back up what we do, because we don't care if it backs up what we do. We see the results with patients all the time.
Yeah.
But the study agrees with what you see all the time.
Absolutely.
Which is something that we like to see that as well. Now, as we end this episode, there's also another really a fascinating study that once again goes along with what we've been saying, which is the importance of taking probiotics.
Oh yeah, this was fascinating.
With antibiotics, right? Because this is a question that we get asked all the time. My doctor just put me on antibiotics. Should I be taking probiotics?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Before,
during, and after.
Yeah. And the study shows what? It shows, right, that once you take an antibiotic, okay, it like we always said this, that it doesn't know what to kill. It kills the good, it kills the bad. The problem is, and this is fascinating about this study, is that it shows that when you take an antibiotic, you are left with, there's a residue that is left in the gut of bacterial endotoxins. And so, we didn't really know that maybe so much before. We just know that they killed everything. So now you don't have enough friendly bacteria.
So now they're almost leaving like a fingerprint behind.
They leave, and this is why, in my opinion, is why there's so many superbugs too, right? That they're developing all this resistance. But now they're showing if you don't take a probiotic. And you know what? There's a lot of physicians that are telling their patients to take a probiotic, but there's just too many that are not doing it yet. Like, hello, just do some reading on the importance of probiotic, and you'll see. So, folks, listen. If you have to take an antibiotic for whatever reason, you take a probiotic, like you said, before, during, and after, and make sure after, because the big thing is these endotoxins. Or you have to replace your bacteria, true, but number two, these probiotics will go after that residue of endotoxins, these bacterial endotoxins that are left in the gut and probably in the sinuses and probably in the brain and probably, everywhere. And this is why there's so many side effects to antibiotics. But that's another podcast.
Yeah, so, very fascinating studies. But, again, we're out of time. The key takeaway from this episode is, get more DHA. Can never go wrong by getting more fish oil.
Yeah.
Also, that whole coconut study.
Debunked.
Yeah, garbage. We don't like it. We didn't like it then. We definitely don't like it now. It goes against what we see in our clinic. And if you're taking antibiotics, you absolutely should be on probiotics as well. So we want to thank you for listening to this episode. If you're not a newsletter subscriber, you can go to our website, martinclinic.com, and sign up for our newsletters. We give a lot of information 2-3 times a week. We just breaking down studies, sharing tips, all those kind of things. So if you're not a newsletter subscriber, go to our website. If you could do us a favor and if you're listening in iTunes, if you could just leave a quick review or rating, that would help us out tremendously. We would really appreciate that. So again, we want to thank you for listening, and be sure to tune again next week.